VikesNow, Dustin Baker here with Josh Frey. After a Vikings victory, we're bringing you the Wednesday edition where we talk half about the Packers, half about the Eagles. How was your week, good sir?
It was good. Always love to see a Vikes victory over the Packers. So that got it off to a nice, sweet start for me. So
Yeah, well, you're the segue layer here because we're going to talk about the Packers first and the 23-7 triumph. I was there. It was ruckus. It was awesome. It was a delightful drive home because it's always 4 hours when I'm heading home. But let's go through some of the items that stood off the page to you.
so I've got really three main takeaways from this game that I feel like a lot of people haven't really talked about yet. Just to sort of keep it fresh. First off, of all the teams in the NFL that didn't play their starters in the preseason, I think the Vikings are the only team that really came out firing in all cylinders this weekend. You look at like the Green Bay Packers; they stunk up the joint, especially on the offensive side of the ball. No sync or rhythm with Rodgers or his receivers, and then Denver Broncos, that Monday night debacle, bunch of delay games. That fourth quarter clock management thing where I'm still not really sure what they were trying to do there. And then you look at the Rams Thursday night. Obviously, Matthew Stafford, his elbow is probably still bugging him a little bit. And then you're playing the Buffalo Bills, who are the Super Bowl favorites heading into the year. But they were terrible on the offensive side of the ball. Allen Robinson, Cam Akers, nowhere to be found for most of the night. Stafford, like we said, probably hurt, but he was out of sync too. So really, the Vikings are the only team that didn't play their starters and came out looking really good on Sunday. So I think that's just kudos to Kevin O'Connell, that entire coaching staff for getting those guys prepped all through training camp and into the week. So yeah, really good job by those guys.
So
Then
the lack of rust, it was a little surprising because
it was,
you
yeah.
just kind of figured that, all right, if we're gonna have three and outs, that's fine. That's the price you pay for a pristine bill of health. And then it was the opposite on that. I've talked about it now like 10 times with various people on that first drive, getting down to fourth and goal. That was actually on the 5 yard line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it wasn't in the heat of the moment. You know, you look back on it, you're like, God, were they on the one or the two? But it was on the 5 yard line. So it wasn't like this gimme, just punch it in without any hesitation. They're like, this is what we do now. We're going for this. And screw you if you don't like it. And then they scored on just a marvelous play call. And you really couldn't script a better transition from Zimmer to O'Connell because there was no pussyfooting around about, are we going to go for it? Let's call a timeout. Let's run the kicker on and let's run him back off. It was elementary that they were going to go for it. And I can't communicate how different that felt. Are you in agreement?
Oh, totally. Like from that very first play, you send Adam Thielen in motion and it's an out route to Johnny Munt. Like you right from the start, you're like, okay, this is a completely different offense from what they were running the past few years. Like I don't think I've ever seen so much pre-snap motion with a Viking squad, especially in recent seasons. So this was just an incredible start. And I think the other thing that I really took away from this is I don't think we saw more than like 10% of this offensive playbook on Sunday. Like they jumped out to that early lead and then they kind of just got conservative in the second half because they didn't really need to do anything else. They could just run the ball, burn some clock, and then on the other side of the ball, let the Packers run as much as they want. Like I think that's why AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones were able to average like 5-6 yards a carry because by the second half you're like, okay, yeah, you guys can go do that all you want and burn all the clock. So
You know, it was funny. I was sitting up in section 314 and my other season ticket neighbor, who I don't talk to quite as much, but he was in a good mood for this game, is I kept, when Cousins was in the shotgun, I kept thinking, oh God, it's third down already. And I would look at the board to figure out if it was third and what, but then it'd only be second down. I'd be like, oh no, we can do shotgun anytime we want now. And I was so used to the vibe of seeing Cousins and shotgun on third down that I tricked myself into thinking, God, I thought we just had a 5 yard gain. It's third down already. But that's because they were brazen enough with the times enough to have a shotgun on first and second down.
yeah, no, the play action, pre-snap motion, just all the offensive stuff that we've been begging to see for the past few years. It was really nice to come out there week one and see it all come into fruition for us. So
Yeah, and now, last week we were talking about the stakes, about playing the Packers, their building, first game for the head coach. Now it feels glorious that they played the Packers in the first game because had they just beaten the Bears or if it was just some garbage like the Falcons at home, then you'd be like, well, yeah, they got a better roster. They should have beat them. But when it's the Packers, even as they're assimilating to their new roster without Devontae Adams, it means a lot.
Oh, for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
the one last thing that I really want to touch on before moving on to the Eagles is if you look across the NFL and especially the NFC, this is the Vikings are like one of three teams that can come away from this weekend feeling great about every single side of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Like the offense was great, defense was great, special teams was great. Like the NFC, there were 8 wins. 3 of them came in the NFC East. They were
Mm-hmm.
all really like nail biters. They come down to the end. I don't think the Giants are going to be able to pull off what they did last week on a week-to-week basis. Look at the North. The Bears, they won because it was a slot fest at Soldier Field.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of just snuck away with one there against the 49ers. And then the Saints, you get down by 16 to the Falcons. That's never good. Buccaneers offense look rusty. Seahawks again. I don't think they're going to pull off what they pulled off on Monday every single week, especially if they were playing anybody else. I feel like they would have lost that game. But yeah, look at the NFL. The Vikings are one of the few teams that can really be happy about what happened this weekend.
I told my wife driving back home, I was like, this is going to change the way the world thinks about them. I mean, you can book that. And
Oh yeah,
sure enough, besides Pro Football Talk, every power ranking entity, all of the sports books, it was like they turned on a switch, a light bulb, and like, oh, okay, so this team that has Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Eric Kendricks, Neil Hunter, Harrison Smith is actually good. Why didn't we think of that? And
yeah.
I think what you and I have been saying now for 3 months is kind of what the rest of the world is feeling is that with all these guys on the roster, it has to be a winning football team. And I think the rest of the folks are coming around to the party that Zimmer doesn't work there anymore.
Yeah. And I think just Kirk Cousins really buying into the system and like not settling for checkdowns all the time and really taking those shots with Jefferson. Like they were wide open this week, but if
Mm-hmm.
he continues to just find him anywhere on the field and just move the ball down, I think he had a perfect passer rating on throws over 10 yards this weekend. So if he keeps doing that and just keeps buying into the system, I think the sky's the limit for this team.
Yeah, and the guy is money. When you give him the green light to let it fly, it's not like this to me or you is breaking news that Cousins can throw the ball deep. He's done this his whole career. It's just that when he was in a run first or defense first organization, he was subservient. He obeyed too much to what the old warhorse Zimmer wanted. And now that it's that whole collaborative, the word that's been used since January, it's like, you have the right guy. If you want to flip the damn ball downfield, it's not like this is something new Cousins has to learn. You just got to allow him to do it.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, there was absolutely nothing on Sunday that I really came out of this game feeling like, I wonder if that's going to bite him in the butt later on in the year. I mean, the offensive line, like I feel like it had its struggles at parts of the game, but I feel like that was expected, especially with Ed Ingram, Garrett Bradbury in the middle. Like I don't think there was anything too unexpected with those two, especially against a defense like the Packers.
Yeah, and remember, we talked about this last week. All of the marvelousness that they put out on offense was done allegedly against one of the best defenses in the world. And so you start to think, well, what can they do against the Panthers? What could they do against the Texans? If they could do that to the Packers, they should be able to carve up an ordinary defense. So,
For
all
sure.
right,
For sure.
Eagles. All right. So I'm still nervous about this game. I know that the first game was awesome, but when the Vikings go on the road on Monday Night Football, they do not win. They flat out do not through 3 regimes. And so I will be ultra hyped if they win, especially if they win convincingly. But let's walk through your Eagles thoughts and kind of your temperature about, can they pull this off or not?
So I ended up going back and rewatching that Lions Eagles game a couple days ago. And the biggest takeaway for me, at least negatively for the Eagles, that I think the Vikings could be able to take advantage of is the fact that the Eagles just cannot stop the run right now. I think they're just working in a bunch of new pieces on defense. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams had pretty much whatever they wanted on Sunday in the running game. I know Swift broke off a 50-yarder right at the beginning of the game. They ended up averaging almost 10 yards a clip. And if the Vikings can find a way to really take advantage of the running game this week, I think they could pull off a victory here. Um, I I just think that if this offensive line was really good at run blocking this weekend, like the pass protection
Yeah,
was bad.
they've always been that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like Ed Ingram ended up having, I think it was what, the second or third best run blocking grade per PFF in the entire league amongst
Yeah.
guards. So if they can find a way to block and put some running game together, I think they can come away with a win. But I'm very nervous about the secondary of the Eagles. I think if any team is going to be able to slow down Justin Jefferson this week, or this season, it's going to be this team. Like they have
Yeah.
so much talent in the secondary, they can put pretty much anybody on him, which is something the Packers couldn't do because they were trying to run a zone against him. But when you're putting him all over the field and getting mismatches, he's gonna go off on you. There's no way around it. But this defense has so many stars that they can put anybody on him, and they can do a reasonably good job on him.
So they'll be missing Derek Barnett.
Right.
He tore his ACL. I guess Janarius Robinson's on the team now, and he's never played a regular season game, so I doubt he does much. But he's on the depth chart, nevertheless. So without Barnett, I think it's a little reduced up front, and that was supposed to be one of their. I mean, they have just like the Packers, they've got a paper defense or on paper defense that looks wonderful. Didn't really do the trick against the Lions, but maybe it needed time to shake off that rust. Oh boy! So when you watch the tape, so on Garrett Bradbury, in his defense, he actually is a good run blocker. It's just that he's so bad in pass protection that everybody wants to get rid of him. So this offensive line knows how to run the ball when they need to, because they did it all together. That group's done it for 3 straight years now. But what is the bigger X factor, getting Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison going, or the Eagles' ability to put the clamps on Jefferson? Because now Jefferson's a marked man. He should have been a marked man last week, but they didn't care about him. They thought they could get cute. And so if they give him the Calvin Johnson treatment, Thielen can get more involved. But what gives here? Do you think it's more of an advantage for the Vikings to run the ball, or should they stick to this pass happy approach?
I do think that they should run pretty much the exact same approach that they had last week. Come out early, try to punch him in the mouth. And the Packers almost responded with that Watson touchdown, Watson should have been touchdown.
Oh, they should have. Oh man,
yeah, but they didn't. And I think they should just run it back. Try to punch him in the mouth, see if they respond. And if they don't, then great. You can start getting the running game involved a little bit. But if they do, just go back and throw another haymaker. Just keep it going. I think Jefferson is going to be the guy that you have to get going in this game. It's always been you use the run to sort of open up the passing game. I think they should use the passing game to open up the run this week.
Yeah. What about Irv Smith? He was a naughty little secret was that Johnny Munt was a TE1 this week, and they tried to wiggle that in underneath the rug to us, and just said it wasn't a good matchup or whatever. But do you think that they actually use him this week, or is this they're just showing us that we don't really need this Irv Smith guy?
So I do kind of buy that they were sort of still getting him up to speed with this offense. I mean, it's obviously a complex offense that they're running in Minnesota now. And I think it is going to take a few weeks for him to get up to speed. I don't think he's like a total non-factor anymore, but I also don't think that they necessarily need him to be the superstar that everybody wants him to be. You've got Jefferson, that's going to be a 30-year targets every single week, or it should be at least. Then you got Thielen, you got Osborne, you got Smith. We've talked about it pretty much all summer. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and I don't think he's going to be a guy that you see go off for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns or whatever. But I do think he's going to have a role at some point.
Yeah, and I think we have to start to get used to that, because last year Higbee and the Rams won their Super Bowl. Johnny Munt was there, by the way, and I think the long term is that if this is how it is, then Irv may not be needed here. Maybe that offense doesn't need a second round draft pick tight end. I mean, that's probably way too early to forecast that, but if you see more Munt, it's just Smith evidently ain't it. 2 more things I want to ask you. Do you think Jalen Reagor makes a thumbprint on this game for, going home type factor?
I don't necessarily think he's going to have a huge role in the offense this week. I think it's kind of the same thing with Smith. They're both still getting up to speed with this group, and I think O'Connell's still trying to figure out what exactly they can do with these guys on the offense. I do think there's going to be one or two games this year where you look at oh man, Reagor had a great game, or oh man, Irv Smith had a great game. But yeah, it's going to be few and far between of those. I think he did great as a punt returner. I think he keeps doing that this week, but I don't know. I don't see a huge role for him in the offense.
Okay. My second to last thing is that Kene Nwangwu and Ty Chandler pitched the shutout on offense. These speed goblins weren't used. Is that just the way it is because Madison and Cook are so good, or do you expect these guys to get mixed in every now and then if Cook and Madison are healthy?
I do think that especially Nwangwu will have a little bit more of a role moving
Okay.
forward. Again, it's the same sort of thing with Smith and Rager. You're still kind of trying to figure out what you can do with these guys because the talent's obviously there. Like they're off the chart speed. Nwangwu he had a decent preseason as a receiver, so I think you do get a few snaps with him, maybe on like a screen out of the backfield or something. And I think that's something that they did it a little bit last week, but with Bradbury's athleticism, if you can get him out in the open field, sort of the second level of the defense, and start blocking for some of these screen passes, that's something that he did really well last week. And I think that's something that they can continue to do with him. So I expect him to be a little bit more involved moving forward in the offense, Ty Chandler and Nwangwu.
Okay, cool. All right. And then I don't know if you want to put it on camera or if you're going to do it in writing, but you got a prediction for me?
So the thing I'm most nervous about, we haven't talked about it yet.
Okay.
I do think that Ed Donatel defenses have a very concerning past with mobile quarterbacks, and especially last season against Jalen Hurts, the Eagles kind of put it on the Broncos. They won, I think it was 30-13 or something last week, and they had over 200 yards rushing. You look back, and Josh Allen's Bills have always put up almost 200, if not more than 200 rushing yards on the defense in Denver the past few years. Gardner Minshew in 2019, his Jaguars put up 250 yards rushing on him. And it's not like 2020, the Denver Broncos defense was pretty bad, but 19 and 21, they were really good against the run, and they were top 10 in terms of like points allowed, yards allowed. So it's not like these are bad defenses that they were running out there. It's just mobile quarterbacks have given Donatel a bit of trouble in recent years. So I do think the Eagles are going to come out. They're going to come out with Jalen Hurts. They're going to come out and get a victory at home. That crowd's going to be crazy. It's kind of like what Minnesota was. So I'm going 30-24 Eagles this week.
I'm talking myself into that, because I need to see them winning on Monday Night Football on the road for me to believe it, to be convinced that it's different now, because for the last half of the Childress era, all of the Leslie Frazier era, and all the Mike Zimmer era, they did not win on the road on Monday Night Football unless they played the Bears. So I guess I'm trying to taper the enthusiasm. Like, yeah, you beat the Packers. Were they rusty? Were they acclimating to life without, Zadarius Smith and Devontae Adams? So I'm right there with you. I'm not sure on a score yet, but the thing that's funny and sad about your observation of Donatel struggling mobile quarterbacks is I've got news for you. Historically, the Minnesota Vikings also struggle against mobile quarterbacks. So not a good mix.
Yeah, not a great combination there.
All right, my dude. We'll be back Wednesday. We'll either be talking about a 1-1 team or a 2-0 team, but you got any closing arguments?
Go Vikes, baby. That's all I got for you.
All right. Find him at Fried Chicken on Twitter. He is the editor of PPTSD.com. And that's all we got. And Skol, baby.